Hello, this is PZF, and today I will be ranking the healers for Phase 3 Season of Discovery from the must-have healers to the underperforming. Um, in this video, I'm mainly going to focus on PvE content, so specifically the new 20-man Sunken Temple raid. And for some context, I played WoW back in vanilla up until Cataclysm, and now I'm back for Season of Discovery. I have mainly been playing healers in Season of Discovery, and at this point, I have a level 40 priest, a 40 resto druid, and a 40 holy paladin. I've cleared Nomer on all these classes as well as BFD, and I solo heal every lockout now on my druid. So due to the new runes and gear that are coming in Phase 3, I think that we're going to see a shift in the healer meta. So let's get into the tier list. Okay, so for S tier, these are going to be must-have healers. So you're going to have at least one of these in your raid, and these healers are going to be so good that you may even bring multiple of them. A tier is going to perform well in pretty much any healing situation. Um, they're going to be able to handle most situations as well as an S tier healer, but they're not going to be quite as useful, maybe in terms of utility or in specific healing situations. The B tier. So B is going to perform well in only in specific situations. B tier healers are they're gonna do all right, but they're mainly gonna thrive in specific healing situations. So they could be S tier or they could be C or D tier on certain fights. So this kind of makes them average out around the middle of the pack, which is why they are B tier. The C tier is going to underperform in most healing situations. Yeah, similar to B tier, they're going to do okay. However, they're not going to excel in any healing situation, really. Um, so that makes them worse than B tier. And then the D tier is just going to underperform in all healing situations. So essentially, these healers could be replaced by any other healer, and that would be the best move in terms of the raid's success. Okay, so I'll start with the Holy Priest. So the positives about the Holy Priest is that they have very high heals per second. The Holy Priests are getting some new, very powerful runes, including Divine Aegis and um, Surge of Light. And Divine Aegis adds shields to the target from critical heals. And Surge of Light essentially makes your next smite or flash heal instant cast when you get a critical heal. So um, yeah, these runes, they're not unique to Holy. However, they're going to scale more if you go down the Holy Talent tree because of the 10% increase healing, as well as the increased healing from Spirit that you get as a Holy Priest. Um, I think Holy Priests are going to perform as well slash better than the Disc Priest in terms of their healing output. However, they bring less utility by not bringing power infusion. The negatives of the Holy Priest is that they're not going to bring very much DPS, um, and they don't bring as much utility. So the Holy Priest doesn't bring power infusion, and it's going to be hard to justify the slight amount of extra healing the Holy Priest will do. Um, in like trading off that with power fusion. Yeah, so for that reason, I think the Holy Priest is gonna get an A. So the Holy Priest is gonna essentially perform well in any healing situation. They have the same exact healing toolkit as the Discipline Priest, and they're even gonna do slightly more healing based on their talents. But the Holy Priest doesn't bring power infusion. Um, and I guess they don't bring the spirit buff either. So a big part of bringing the priest at all is power infusion. Um, so even though holy might be more fun to play and you might do slightly more healing, um, people are likely just going to expect you to come as a disciplined priest if you're going to play priest at all. All right, so the next one is Holy Paladin. So I think Holy Paladins are the best healers for long fights that have high tank damage and low raid wide damage, essentially high single target damage or incoming damage. Holy Pallies just got 2 new runes for the head slot, uh, 2 new runes specific to healing, which is a little disappointing to have to choose in between them when they didn't get any new healing runes for the wrist slot. Um, so the positives about the Holy Paladin is that the Holy Paladin is the most efficient tank healer. And the Holy Paladin is going to be an even better and even more efficient tank healer with the new rune Fanaticism, which increases their holy crit chance by 18%. So this is when you have your shield running on the tank, that increases your crit chance of Flash of Light. I think it's called Sacred Shield. Plus your crit chance from your raid-wide buffs and just your gear, you're probably going to have like around a 70 or maybe even 80% crit chance on Holy or on Flash of Light. And so essentially you're just going to have a free healing spell. And that is extremely useful for long fights where the tank is taking a lot of damage. Um, Another positive about the Holy Paladin is that they bring a unique playstyle compared to the other healers, which is that they kind of have like a melee weaving playstyle. Um, and this is due to the Sheath of Light rune, which requires you to run in and attack the boss for a bit to get the Sheath of Light proc in order to get more healing power. And that's kind of a fun unique thing about the Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin also has high survivability because they wear plate. Um, and they also have a toolkit including Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Protection, and Cleanse, making them bring a lot of utility to the raid. And just in general, uh, while I played Holy Paladin, I think Holy Paladin is a lot of fun because you get lots of critical heals, and it's always fun to just see yourself critting all the time. You get to do this unique playstyle of melee weaving, um, and you'll never really run out of mana, depending on kind of the damage, the incoming damage. The negatives about the Holy Paladin are that they have poor raid-wide healing. Holy Paladins don't have any AoE healing spells at the moment. Um, Holy Paladins also have a low range of abilities to choose from. So Holy Paladins only have Flash of Light, Holy Light, and Shock of Light, or Holy Shock. And although these can be utilized in different ways, kind of working with Beacon of Light, and Sacred Shield, you still don't have that many buttons to press in terms of what you use to heal. Another thing just to make a comment on is that the main healing spells of the Holy Paladin are not runes, and typically runes are the most powerful healing spells, and they also scale um, way better because they're not dependent on like a certain level bracket. Um, so another negative about the Holy Paladin is they have low mobility. So because the Holy Paladin only has one instant cast healing spell, which is relatively weak, the Holy Paladin essentially has to stay planted in one place if they need to get a lot of healing done. Yeah, this leads to low mobility. And another negative aspect of the Holy Paladin is that although they have a melee weaving playstyle, they do not do that much damage. You're typically just going to be using a one-hander and a shield, and maybe using like Divine Storm and maybe concentration. Um, but your damage is really low. You'll just get beat by mage healers and druid healers every time. Um, but yeah, with that being said, um, I think that Holy Paladins go into the B tier. Um, Essentially, Holy Paladins are going to perform well in specific healing situations. They might even perform the best in certain healing situations. But without knowing kind of how the fights are going to play out in Sunken Temple, I'm just going to put them in B tier. If they're by some chance they're every single fight in Sunken Temple are like 5-minute fights with a ton of tank damage, then I think Holy Paladin could be up in the S tier or the A tier, but I kind of doubt that's gonna be the case. Okay, so next we'll talk about the Arcane Mage, the healing mage. So yeah, I'd like to preface this by saying I have not yet played an Arcane Mage, um, but I have reviewed some Warcraft logs, but I'll basically be speaking more at a high level with regards to classes I haven't played. So the positives about the healing mage is that healing mages bring by far the most damage. It's basically, or the most damage with respect to the other healers. It's basically not even a competition how much damage the healing mage is going to do compared to the other healers. For example, in Omergon, the Arcane Mage is probably going to do maybe 2 to 400 DPS, and the Resto Druid slash Boomkin comes in second place and might do like 100 to 300 DPS. And but then the Paladin, the Priest, and the Shaman, they're all going to be doing like 50 to 100 DPS. So the Arcane Mage, even on the low end, is going to beat most other healers in terms of DPS. So that's one of the main positives about the Arcane Mage. The Healing Mage also brings interrupts, crowd control, and the intellect buff. And the Healing Mage is going to shine in short fights due to the high damage that they bring. The negatives about the Healing Mage is that they have an unpredictable healing style. So, for example, in fights that require a lot of movement, the mage may struggle to do more damage in those fights. because they can't stand in one place to cast spells. And then since they can't do the damage, their healing depends on the damage that they do. So in certain situations, the healing mage may struggle to get a lot of healing output. Um, yeah, the mages also need a higher hit rating in order to do better healing, while other healers do not. This puts mages in an odd place where they need pure damage gear, um, but typically pure damage gear has less MP5 and spirit. So this could lead to the healing mage having less mana regeneration compared to the other healers and potentially going easier. Also, it's not good to have the possibility of your heals not be applied because your damage dealing ability that's required to do the heal misses the target. Um, Another negative is that the the runes coming in phase 3 do not seem to address the healing mage issues in regards to their unpredictability. Um, one of the new runes is Temporal Anomaly, which applies shields to players that are close to the target that it's cast on. And this is a good thing that mages will be able to cast shields on other players. But again, they cannot choose which players are going to get this shield. And it just kind of adds to their unpredictability. Um, yeah, so the mage is going to get a B. So I think the mages are going to perform well in specific healing situations. So for example, mage healers are awesome for short fights like Grubus or Viscous Fallout. They do extremely high DPS by a mile compared to the other healers. However, mages may be too unreliable and risky for high damage and longer encounters. Um, I think mages will likely fill off healing spots um, due to their high DPS, but then there may be in that situation you may just want to bring a pure damage mage and bring like a another pure healer um or less or like maybe instead of having an off healer just bring more pure healers and just a pure damage mage instead. Um, but yeah, I think mages are going to do well in specific fights. Okay, so the Resto Shaman. Yeah, Resto Shaman is another class I have yet to play. It seems so far in phase 1 and 2, the Resto Shaman seems to be struggling in the healing department. But this is understandable because, at least in phase 2, at least, how strong shamans have become in every other way. So the positives for the Resto Shaman is that they're very mana efficient and they bring Mana Tide Totem, which is very helpful for the party. Uh, Resto Shamans have decent AoE heals through Chain Heal, and they also get max rank Chain Heal at level 50, which is good. The Resto Shaman is getting 2 new healing runes in phase 3. One of them is Tidal Waves, which is going to reduce the mana cost of the next 2 healing spells on a target or on the target and increase the crit chance. And they also get Riptide, which is very similar to Druid's Regrowth, which is 1 large heal, and then a heal over time is applied afterwards. Um, these are good additions for single healing targets. The negatives about a Resto Shaman is The overall heals per second output of shamans is the lowest out of any class. And I don't see this changing with their new runes. I was watching San Medina's Healer Tillis video, and I think he made a really good point, which is that in the past, Resto shamans were known for its raid-wide healing, for their raid-wide healing. However, these new runes essentially improve the Resto shaman's single target healing, rather than like leaning into what the Resto shaman has previously been known for doing well, which is raid-wide healing. So what this does is it essentially makes the Resto shaman a mediocre single target healer and a mediocre raid-wide healer. Another thing is that they bring low DPS. So Resto shamans don't bring that much healing, but they also don't bring that much DPS. They do have more predictable healing compared to the Arcane mage, but that uh it, it's almost not even worth it because the Resto shaman's healing output is just not that high. Um yeah, so the Resto shaman gets a C. So the Resto shaman essentially underperforms in most healing situations. Uh, in my opinion, the shaman is still one of the coolest healers simply due to chain heal. I think chain heal is one of the most iconic healing spells in the game just due to its animation and how it appears visually. I think just getting a little nostalgic, looking back on vanilla WoW, I always remember the shaman's chain heal in like World of Warcraft videos and just thinking how cool it was. So I think for just like the lore and the nostalgia, the Resto Shaman is really cool. But I don't see the Shaman being the best healer in essentially any situation. But the thing is, the the Shaman in general is, I think, the best tank, period. And they do extremely high DPS too, so you can't be the best at everything. Um, so if we get into Sunken Temple and the healing matters because we're taking a lot of raid wide or tank damage, I think the Resto Shaman may even be a D tier, um, because it's essentially just going to bring down the success of the raid by bringing a healer that is unable to have enough healing output, but also not bring that much damage and not bring any additional utility that the shaman tank or the shaman DPS will. Um, I guess besides mana totem, that's the main thing that they'll be able to bring, but that might not be worth it if the incoming damage is just too high to deal with. So yeah, Resto Shaman gets a C. Okay, the next one is the Disc Priest. So the Discipline Priest has consistently been the king of all healers in Season of Discovery so far. And I think there are many reasons to believe that this is going to continue as well. So what are the positives about the Disc Priest? The Priest has overall a high heal per second. The Disc Priests also have high utility by bringing buffs, dispels, and power infusion. The Disc Priest is a great tank healer, but also a great AoE healer. And the Disc Priests are only going to get better with the two new healing runes that they're getting. Yeah, really the only downside of the Disc Priests, which is the same as the Holy Priest, is that they just don't bring that much healer DPS. But that's about it. Besides that, the Disc Priest is awesome. So the disc priest is going to go in S tier. I think we're going to have to bring a disc priest to every raid. Um, there's pretty much nothing to lose by bringing a disc priest. They're going to do a ton of healing. They're also going to bring power infusion, which is going to buff all your caster DPS. So yeah, they're mana efficient. I mean, I've played the disc priest as well. The priest is a fun class to play. Um, and they're they're always gonna be brought to speed runs. Um, but they might not be the the kings of phase three, and that's because of the Resto druid. So I play Resto druid as my main, and I'm very excited for the new changes that are being added for phase three. But obviously, I do have some bias because this is my main class. This is what I'm going to level first. So let's just talk about the positives for the Resto Druid. The Resto Druid has extremely strong AoE healing. Wild Growth is the best healing spell in the game. And I don't think that it's even really debatable. Wild Growth has massive healing. It's instant cast. It's on a 6 second cooldown. It's mana efficient. It heals over time, so it can't be easily heal sniped. And I think it's just a better healing spell than the Priest's Circle of Healing due to it being applied over time. Um, Resto Druids are also getting some new runes, uh, healing that's going to benefit the healing toolkit. So this is the first one is Efflorescence, which is a new healing rune that applies a heal over time to all party members of the target of Swiftmen over 30 seconds. Um, so I think that this spell is going to make the Druid the best AoE healer and potentially the highest heal per second healer. Um, so now our Swiftmans essentially apply a longer and constant form of wild growth. And I think this is going to be huge. Essentially, we're getting another wild growth, but it's applied for a longer period of time, even though it doesn't heal as fast as wild growth. It's kind of like a slow, constant version of wild growth. But having a heal over time that lasts for 30 seconds is it's it's pretty insane because we'll have that running every 15 seconds, but then we'll be able to cast multiple wild growths between each efflorescence and Swiftmen. So I don't know. I just think that I don't think other healers are going to be able to put that much healing output as the Resto Druid because having this constant heal over time, and that's just one of the heal over times we have. We obviously have rejuvenation and life bloom and regrowth. So yeah, we're gonna have a ton of healing output. We're also getting bark skin, and bark skin is a similar spell to pain suppression, but it essentially reduces incoming damage by 20%, and it's on a 1 minute cooldown. So efflorescence essentially makes us probably the best AoE healer in the game, but this bark skin spell, along with life bloom, is going to make us also one of the best tank healers in the game. Another positive about druids is that they have the highest mobility. So a majority of the healing spells that druids have are all instant cast. So this means druids can easily follow fight mechanics that require movement without having to sacrifice any of their healing output. Um, so yeah, this is priests still have to stand and cast penance or flash of light, but druids are likely going to be doing all of their spells will be instant casts, as our I think we'll probably be using Swiftmen instead of Nourish. Um, but even if we have to use Nourish, it's a really fast healing spell. So yeah, druids have a ton of mobility. Druids are also mana efficient because they have Innervate. Druids bring the Mark of the Wild buff. Um, Another thing that's a positive about a druid is their unique heal over time playstyle. Um, but druids also bring high DPS. So druids are the second highest damage dealers for all of the healers in phase two. Um, but they're way more kind of versatile and dependable in their healing capabilities compared to the mage healer. Um, yeah, so druids also are preemptive healers in the sense that um, a lot of the healing that's being done by the druid is coming from heal over time spells. Um, so druids can essentially like create a blanket of rolling hots. So if you know a certain party or if the tank is about to start taking a lot of damage, you can just stack up a bunch of heals over time before that damage comes to kind of offset the large incoming damage. Um, but what's good about druids is that that doesn't come at any cost because druids also can be very reactive because Nourish is a very mana efficient, really fast, large heal. And then we also have a 3-minute cooldown for an instant cast max rank healing touch for other emergency moments. Um, yeah, so what are the negatives about druids? So druids don't bring spells to buff other players like power infusion. Also, the buff that they do bring, Mark of the Wild, is a pretty weak buff compared to what the paladin, the mage, and the priest can bring. Druids also don't have any shields, so they can't uh they can't cast spells that absorb damage. The druid essentially mitigates damage just by healing through it. Um, Resto druid is going to be a must-have for the raid, and I also think that druids might have the highest heal per second in phase three. In Nomergon, the fights were a decent amount more healing intensive than BFD. And I think if Blizzard continues to scale the incoming damage linearly, then we may have some pretty high damage fights in Sunken Temple. And this is where the Druid, I think, is going to shine. Um, yeah, I could see happening that the fights becomes damage intensive enough where like if you had to choose between two priests and maybe a priest and a resto druid, you're gonna bring the resto druid and one priest for power infusion, or potentially even bring two resto druids if the damage is really intense, a lot of raid wide damage potentially. And it also kind of depends on Well, first, I'm speculating, but I think the Resto Druid is gonna out heal the Holy Priest or the Disc Priest in terms of heals per second. If that's the case, and the fights are very healing intensive, then the Resto Druid's going to be the most sought after healer in phase 3. Um, but the Resto Druid doesn't bring any dispels, which is a major kind of flaw with their healing toolkit. Um, so you're still gonna have to bring at least one priest. Um, but yeah, that's kind of why I think that the druids are gonna be the top healer in phase 3. I think they're pretty much neck and neck with the disc priest, but the resto druid is probably gonna have a higher healing output. Um, Another thing is that druids are also getting new epic crafted gear that has objectively better healing stats compared to the cloth healing gear. So it seems like Blizzard is leaning into a pure resto build, which is nice to see. Um, yeah, for honorable mentions, I also just wanted to comment about the Shadow Priest and the Restokin. Um, so these are both DPS classes essentially, but they bring a lot of healing output. I think that both of these classes are going to be featured in most raids, because of the Boomkin buff, the 3% crit, and the priests also bring dispels and the stamina buff. I do expect to see more boomkins than the shadow priests, however, since the priest buff will likely be covered by the discipline priests anyways, while the casters will appreciate the 3% crit from the boomkin form. Now that we have dual spec coming, all the resto druids are going to be able to build a pure healing set and a pure damage set. So they won't necessarily have to choose between um, they're not going to have to choose between what gear to use in certain fights. Or they will be able to switch their gear and their talents between fights. So essentially, when it's time for a healing intensive fight, you can go full resto with healing gear. And if the fight doesn't require extra healing, then you can just go full damage in boomkin form. In conclusion, I think that priests and druids will be neck and neck for the top healers. I think druids are going to pump uh, in raid wide and tank heals. We may see that druids are going to outperform priests in terms of heal per second. However, priests will continue to bring vital utility to the raid. Holy paladins are going to continue to be great tank healers and potentially the best tank healers for long fights. Mage healers are going to thrive in short fights and will likely continue to bring the highest DPS by far. Holy priests are going to be great healers, but the extra healing that they get from going deep holy will likely not benefit the raid as much as power infusion does. So I doubt to see many holy priests. Shamans are likely going to underperform compared to the other healers and essentially are going to be outperformed by the druid in every aspect. And let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're playing a healer, what healer are you going to play in phase 3 and why? But yeah, thanks for watching.